All right.
Hi,
Perfect.
everyone. My name is Vanessa Figueroa, and this is the Arizona Commerce Authority ABDG Payment Reimbursement Training. Welcome. Our agenda today is introductions, setting the stage, reimbursement request procedure, submitting a reimbursement request in eCivis, reimbursement approval process, ABDG program administration and support. But first, our introductions. As I said, my name is Vanessa Figueroa, and I am the Grants Compliance Officer here at ACA.
I'm Trey Kublak with KPMG. We're a program advisor to ACA.
My name is Devin Jensen with KPMG, a program advisor to ACA.
And Keaton Gore here, also with KPMG, also a program advisor to ACA.
Now, setting the stage.
Perfect. So each team is a subrecipient of the Arizona Broadband Deployment Grant Funds, the ABDG program. And as such, you're responsible for ensuring and attesting to the proper use of grant funds throughout the project, as well as maintaining the supporting documentation related to grant fund expenditures in accordance with the grant agreement, the CPF program requirements, and the ABDG payment reimbursement guide that's been provided to you. It's your responsibility as a subrecipient to ensure that payment reimbursement requests are for eligible or allowable project cost only. And ACA has provided multiple sources of information to inform each of you as to what is considered an allowable project cost. And all that information can be found in the payment reimbursement guide and subrecipient grant agreements. The purpose of this presentation is to provide information to subrecipients on the payment reimbursement procedure, including what is required by subrecipients to submit a compliant payment reimbursement package. This presentation will also include a walkthrough example of how to complete and submit a payment reimbursement form, and also provide details to the eCivis system and portal, which is the grant management solution that the state of Arizona utilizes and will be required by you on this ABDG program. And then throughout the presentation, we'll also share some helpful suggestions for complying with the payment reimbursement requirements.
Yes, and so now we'll be going through the reimbursement procedure that you as a subrecipient will be going through for this program. So this section is designed to illustrate how the subrecipient will complete the reimbursement process and help show what steps need to be completed and what information needs to be provided to submit a compliant reimbursement package. This slide includes a flowchart of the overall payment reimbursement process, and in the following slides, we will provide more detail around each of the 5 steps you'll go through when submitting a reimbursement. At a high level, the payment reimbursement process is as follows. Step 1. The subrecipient will fill out the payment reimbursement request form. This form is an Excel document that is provided in eCivis. The subrecipient will need to complete the form by the 20th of the month following the close of the month for which you're requesting reimbursement. The final reimbursement request will be required no later than 60 calendar days after the expiration of the grant. Step 2 is gather supporting documentation for the reimbursement request. Once the subrecipient has completed the payment reimbursement request form, the subrecipient will need to go gather all supporting document required to support their reimbursement request. So, for example, if the subrecipient is requesting reimbursement for construction-related materials, required supporting information would include, but not be limited to, line-by-line supporting invoices that roll up to the amounts included in the payment reimbursement form, as well as supporting payment details so that ACA can substantiate that payment was made by the subrecipient and verify the reimbursement amounts. Step 3. Input cost categories into eCivis. Once the reimbursement form has been completed and the subrecipient has gathered the required accompanying materials, the subrecipient will input the reimbursement request data into eCivis. There is an abundance of training material which we've linked in this presentation that provides guidance on how to submit information into eCivis. It should be noted that the information submitted into eCivis will need to link or tie back to the information provided in the payment reimbursement form and the accompanying submittal materials. Step 4, submit the reimbursement package into eCivis. Once the reimbursement data has been entered into eCivis, the subrecipient will upload its payment reimbursement request form and accompanying materials into eCivis, and they will submit the reimbursement package in its entirety into eCivis. Step 5, the State Broadband Office will review and disperse the reimbursement within 30 days. Once the subrecipient submission is complete, ACA will be notified of this submission, and ACA will commence their review of the reimbursement package. ACA will either approve and route approval to its accounts payable team for reimbursement, or ACA will return the package to the subrecipient through eCivis, requesting additional information to substantiate the submittal or to address and correct a deficiency. So we'll now go into greater depth into step 1, which is completing the payment reimbursement request form. So the subrecipient is to populate the Microsoft Excel template following the instructions provided within the template, which is also referred to as the ABDG reimbursement request form. Subrecipients can find this template on the eCivis portal. Each monthly request should include a new clean template with the request for that period. Subrecipients should not utilize the same form for subsequent submission packages. It should be noted that ACA may update the reimbursement request form from time to time, and as such, subrecipients should be sure to retrieve the most recent form from eCivis for each reporting period. Subrecipients must certify that the expenses included in the reimbursement request are allowable project costs and are 1, consistent with the grant agreement and program guidance, 2, related to the approved project, and 3, are properly supported. It is the subrecipient's responsibility to provide accurate and up-to-date information, and any errors or omissions in the information submitted may result in delays, additional costs, or rejection of the request. Refer to the ABDG Payment Reimbursement Guide found in section 4.1.3.3, Project Cost Matrix. The Project Cost Matrix provides examples of allowable and unallowable project costs for reimbursement within each eCivis cost category. Now we'll discuss step 2, which is gathering supporting documentation for the reimbursement request. Subrecipients are required to submit all accompanying documentation to substantiate the costs included in the payment reimbursement request form. Supporting documentation includes the vendor invoice. The reimbursement request must include vendor invoices that provide 1, itemized line item detail of expenses, discounts, rebates, and taxes. 2, the vendor name and address. 3, the subrecipient name and address. And 4, the date. For each allowable cost, provide the following, including but not limited to: a description of the tasks matching the grant agreement budget, notes about split or partial invoices, and any other documents or evidence as deemed necessary. Additionally, a subrecipient should include a copy of all payment support. This might be a check or an ACH receipt. Payment support should include evidence of actual payments. An accounts payable or general ledger screenshot is unlikely to be sufficient. You need to provide the payment document. In some instances, the State Broadband Office may request further support. Subrecipients will not be reimbursed for any grant funds for costs for any claimed allowable project costs that are not adequately supported by the subrecipient's records. Additionally, all supporting documentation should be in PDF format in individual files, and each supporting document should include a naming convention that matches the reference number of the invoice or payment support. An example of this file naming convention would be to save a file as invoice1234.pdf. Step 3 in the payment reimbursement process is to input cost amounts into their appropriate categories in eCivis. The subrecipient shall populate the cost reimbursement information in eCivis in the appropriate cost categories, which will be similar to those found in the reimbursement request form. eCivis details will be discussed in greater detail later in this training. It is important to note, however, that amounts entered into eCivis must tie back to what is shown on the Reimbursement Calculator tab in the Payment Reimbursement form. Step 4 of the reimbursement process is to submit the reimbursement package into eCivis. When you're finished with steps 1 through 3, the subrecipient will submit the payment reimbursement request form, accompanying supporting documentation, and the eCivis cost categories information into eCivis. After attaching the information, the subrecipient must click Submit Report. After clicking Submit Report, a box shall appear, and on that you'll click OK to submit the report to the State Broadband Office. The final step of the reimbursement process is that the State Broadband Office will review and disperse payment within 30 calendar days. Upon receipt of a properly submitted, complete, and accurate reimbursement request, the State Broadband Office will review and process the reimbursement request and disperse all amounts owed to the subrecipient within 30 calendar days. In some instances, additional time may be needed to review and process reimbursement requests. The State Broadband Office will not disperse any grant funds to the subrecipient for costs that are unallowable or for any claimed allowable project costs that are not adequately supported by the subrecipient's records. If the State Broadband Office determines that the subrecipient has failed to satisfactorily fulfill its obligations under the grant agreement, including but not limited to its obligations with respect to the project, allowable project costs, reimbursement, reporting, and compliance with the Treasury guidance and uniform guidance, or if the subrecipient breaches the terms of the grant agreement, the State Broadband Office has the right to withhold disbursements of grant funds to the subrecipients in accordance with 2 CFR 200. The State Broadband Office may also use the remedies available under law or under the grant agreement. Payments are limited to reimbursement for actual, reasonable, and necessary costs in accordance with the grant agreement and all applicable state and federal requirements. And so at this time, we'll now transition to walking through a demo of the payment reimbursement process. Okay, so what you see on screen to the left is the Microsoft Excel template that will be used for the reimbursement request. We will start working left to right and go through each of the tabs and describe in detail what they contain. So the first tab that you will see is the Instruction tab. This tab should be consulted carefully as it contains detailed instructions on filling out the payment reimbursement Excel. We will not go over in all detail what is contained in these instructions, but a subrecipient should review this thoroughly before completing their first reimbursement request. The subrecipient information tab includes a place to input important information about a subrecipient and about their grant agreement. This tab includes areas for the subrecipient name, the subrecipient UEI number, the match requirement, the amount of federal funds obligated, the reimbursement request start date, the reimbursement request end date, an attestation, which should be thoroughly reviewed by the subrecipient prior to attesting, the date of attestation, and the name of the authorized representative that completed the attestation. Please note that any reimbursement requests submitted without the attestation completed will be returned to the subrecipient for the attestation to be completed. It should also be noted that subrecipients will only edit the cells that are yellow. Other cells are locked and should not be edited. The next tab is the Invoice Input tab, and this is the area of the payment reimbursement form that will require the most data entry. This is where you'll be entering your invoices that you'll be requesting reimbursement for and the supporting payment information. As a demo, we have gone through and prepared 3 example invoices that we will walk through and show you how they will be entered. To start, we will look at an overview of the Invoice Input tab. So on the left of the document, we have spaces to enter the invoice number, invoice date, vendor name, and invoice total. It should be noted that each row should only have 1 invoice, and every invoice needs to have its own row. So each row should be its own unique invoice. As you can see here, each of the invoices are different. In column F, you can see the remaining unallocated invoice. This column will show green and 0 when you have properly allocated an invoice across the different cost categories. For example, if I were to increase this to, say, $8,000, it would now show that we have a $1,000 deficit and that we would need to allocate that amount. To the right, immediately following the invoice information, is a place to input your payment information. So here you will put in details of your check or ACH. And again, it is important that your payment totals and your invoice totals match. Working from the right from there, we now go into the different cost categories that will be found within eCivis. And as you are working to allocate a given invoice, you will work from left to right until you find a cost category that applies to the invoice you're working on. And then once you find that cost category, you will allocate the portion of the invoice that is applicable to that given category into the category. To the right of my screen, you can see our first example invoice. This is invoice number 1234, which is dated on January 1st, 2024. As you can see, these have been entered. This invoice is from Broadband Supply Company, which is a fictitious company. That has been entered into the vendor name. And as we can see, this invoice has a total of $7,000. So we will enter the total as $7,000. In this invoice, there are construction materials, equipment, site work, and engineering fees. Now, as this is an example invoice, this is not meant to be taken too literally. So the names exactly line up with the categories within eCivis. In the real world, you will have to use the project cost matrix and best judgment to properly allocate expenses within the different categories. So for the instance for this invoice, what we would do is we would start working left to right across the different cost categories and wait until we see one that matches what we're trying to allocate. So first up would be, we're looking for the first category that would line up, and we see architectural and engineering fees. Well, in this case, we have engineering fees in the invoice. So we'd enter $4,000 as the total amount applicable to that cost category. Immediately following to the right of where you enter the total is where you'll enter the amount that you will be paying or not requesting reimbursement for. In the example of this fictitious subrecipient, their match requirement is 50%. So they would enter 50% of the total into their cost share. Then one will want to enter their cost description. You will want to likely provide more detail than is provided here. These are simply an example description. We put engineering fees, and then you will want to enter the project use and justification, so engineering fees for ABDG project. We'll continue working left to right till we find the next category that's applicable. So now we're on to site work, and we see our invoice does have site work. We have $1,000 of site work, and again, 50% of that is our match, so we'll enter 500. Again, we'll enter a cost description and the project use and justification. We'll keep working to allocate the rest of the invoice. Remember, an invoice must be fully allocated. So we get to construction and construction materials. We'll enter 1,000, which matches with the total as shown on the invoice. Again, our cost share would be 500. We enter our cost description and project use and justification. There's only one more category in this specific invoice, which would be equipment. So again, we'll enter 1,000. Then our cost share will be 500. We have the cost description and project use. As we continue working to the right, we'll go through the remaining allowable cost categories until we start to arrive at the totals. So for this invoice, we can see that our total eligible spend and match, which is synonymous with the invoice total for eligible costs, is 7,000. And we can see that we are going to match 3,500 of that. We are going to spend for reimbursement 3,500. Now, these words match and spend line up with what you will see in eCivis. As we work further to the right, we'll see columns where you can enter any unallowable ABDG project costs. So these would be costs that are related to the project but are unallowable under the grant program. And then we also have a spot for non-ABDG project costs, which is a general cost category for all non-project related costs that are not being submitted for reimbursement. It is important to scroll all the way to the right and to make sure that the invoice check and payment checks both show true. If you have not fully allocated all the expenses of your invoice, this will not show true. And same thing with the payment check. If you have not fully submitted full payment coverage, so supporting payment, this will show false. You need to have all trues before you submit. There's also a reference number at the end, which will be used when resolving any issues with specific reimbursement requests. And we'll go back all the way to the left and we'll talk about the payment. So we have prepared a couple mock checks. Again, these are completely fictitious. But this check 001 that you see at the top of the right hand of the screen, this would be an example of a check that you have written for payment of the invoice. As we can see, this is for invoice 1234, which ties back here. And we can see it's $7,000. The date is January 20th, 2024. And so we would enter everything as seen. And this is the type of payment detail that we will need to see for reimbursement. We need to see that the invoice has been completely paid for and that the amounts tie to each other. So now I'd like to quickly provide two more examples of invoices where things are slightly different. First, we'll start with invoice number 1235. And the big difference here is in the first example invoice, we had all eligible or all allowable project costs. So everything was allocated in the allowable project costs. However, in this invoice, as we can see, we have Cardinals box seats for $4,000. Again, this is all fictitious, but we can tell this would be not only a non-allowable project cost, but is totally unrelated to the project. So we would look into the invoice number 1235 line. We would enter everything as before. So the invoice date, the vendor name, the invoice total, we would still put the total that's shown on the invoice because those need to tie out. And then we would go through for each category and allocate appropriately. So we would have $1,000 of site work. We would have $1,000 of construction materials. We would have $1,000 of equipment. But at that point, we would only have allocated $3,000 of the total invoice. So we need to allocate all the invoice. Well, the remaining $4,000 is not an allowable project cost. So we would go all the way to the right and we would get to the non-ABDG project costs and we would input the $4,000. And this would get our invoices to tie out. So if you did not input that $4,000, what would happen is you would show a deficit in column F of $4,000. We don't want that, so we make sure to fully allocate the invoice. Then we look over and we have green. Don't know why that one should. Yeah, so we have green everywhere. For a third example, we'll look to invoice number 1236, shown on this line. And the trick with this invoice is that everything is related to the project, but now we have an ongoing O&M. And as we know, ongoing O&M expenses are non-allowable project expenses. So same as before, we'll go through, we will enter in, our invoice number 1236, the date, the vendor, the invoice total, and we'll work left to right, looking at each category and stopping and entering when we see a category that's applicable. So first up will be site work. So we're going to enter our 1,000 for the site work. Then our 1,000 for the construction materials. 1,000 for the equipment. Then we still have that 4,000. So what we're going to do with that, since it's not an allowable project cost, we'll keep working to the right until we get to the unallowable ABDG project costs, and we'll enter in 4,000 there. And that gets us green everywhere. The form is happy, and we're all happy. Now, I'd like to give an example for a check. So let's say the first check was easy. It was one invoice for one check. So let's say you wrote a check and it was for two invoices. So for invoice 1235 and invoice 1236. That's this check. So what we would do is we would allocate the amount applicable to each invoice and split the check across two lines. So we would put check number 002 for invoice 1235 and for invoice 1236, and we would allocate the applicable amount. So if we have $14,000 for the check, 7,000 goes to invoice number 1235 and 7,000 to invoice 1236. In a final example, let's say that you had a check that was for $14,000. 7,000 of it was related to invoice number 1236. And then let's say 7,000 was related to invoice number 1237. And let's say invoice 1237 was not related at all to the ABDG project. Because the check contains payment support for an allowable project cost, we will want to fully include the totality of that check. So what you would want to do is you would want to include a line for this invoice 1237, even if it was totally not related to the ABDG project. And you would want to just go ahead and, this one's pretty easy. You just include a line and then you would just go all the way over and put the full amount into the non-ABDG project costs. So again, that would be in an instance where you had a check that was partially being paid for ABDG reimbursable costs and partially for an invoice totally non-related. So we want every check to be basically fully covered in this reimbursement request, just so that we can tie everything back when we're verifying. So once you've completed entering all your invoices and checks for invoices that you're seeking reimbursement for a given period, you will then move on to the reimbursement calculator tab. And essentially what this tab shows is it shows what you will enter into eCivis. So eCivis will also have all of these categories and will have spend, match, and spend plus match. So we tried to make it really easy and just enter everything as it's shown. And then furthermore, we have a few totals down here at the bottom and a few checks, just making sure things like your match, you're offering to match that in a way that's in accordance with your grant agreement. Again, if you see any falses here, you will need to make them green or true before you submit. So if there are any falses, you either didn't enter enough information or there was perhaps a typo. So just go back and verify. And again, you can go back to the invoice tab, make sure you have all green, scroll all the way to the end, and make sure you have all green there. If any invoices have red next to them, that means that they need attention. Finally, you'll work your way over to the submission check tab. And basically, again, you just want to see green all the way down. And once you see green all the way down, you'll know that assuming that you've inputted all the invoices, that you are requesting reimbursement for, and assuming you're satisfied with the totals that you see on this tab. So for instance, you see your total reimbursement request and you're satisfied with that number. That means that you are ready to submit this into eCivis. If you do see any red or false squares, cells, that essentially means that you need to fix something in the reimbursement request before submitting it. I would consult the text that's in this help area next to it, and if that doesn't work, then I would reach out to the email that we will provide. So at this point, I will go ahead and pass the presentation back over, and we'll be working through eCivis.
Thank you, Keaton, for presenting on the demo and walking through the payment reimbursement package. Now we'll be discussing this submitting a reimbursement request in eCivis. There's a separate manual that has been developed for the subrecipients to utilize to submit a request in eCivis. We've provided the link for this manual at the end of the presentation. So next, we'll discuss how to submit a request for the financial reports. This is a two-part slide. For the purposes of the Arizona Capital Project Fund, CPF, the ABDG program, each subrecipient will have one account with the eCivis Grants Network. For subrecipients that have been awarded more than one project, all CPF and ABDG projects can be accessed using the same login credentials. So as you see here, step 1, select My Rewards from the navigation bar. Step 2, click on Submit Financial Report. Click on the Submit Financial Report section in the award dashboard. Summary of award information and award financial overview. The award detail provides a summary of the award information. The award financial overview is not editable, but will automatically update depending on the amounts that are submitted in the financial report details. This area provides a summary of the total award spent and the total award amount remaining. The financial report details, a schedule will be pre-populated, allowing the subrecipient to be informed of the required reporting periods. The subrecipient is to follow the schedule provided through eCivis. In the financial report details, click inside the report period text box and provide the dates of the report period, then click Apply. Once you have the dates, you will be able to see the schedule. Step 4, the amounts to be entered under spend and match columns. So enter the amounts in the appropriate category under the spend and match columns. Spend is the amount of the grant funds spent. Match is the amount of match funds spent. Applicants can only report in the categories they were awarded. Note, if a category is grayed out and a subrecipient would like to request reimbursement in that category, a budget modification is required. Next, auto calculation of cost once amounts are updated. The spend plus match and award remaining columns will automatically calculate the cost when the spend and match amounts are updated. Additionally, the report totals will automatically calculate to provide a breakdown of the amounts and percentages of funds used in the reporting period. Going to step 7, the reimbursement request check. Once complete, check the box for reimbursement requests. The field will auto-populate with the amount from the spend column. Subrecipients are required to submit supporting documentation and evidence for each reimbursement request submitted. Step 8, financial report narrative and upload files. When this is the final report and the final request for the reimbursement, check the "This is my final report" box. The grant closeout process will automatically begin once this box is checked and submitted. Include any spending details and a brief description about the reporting period's expense in the financial report narrative. The subrecipient can also upload any documents, including PDFs and scanned images. to the financial report. Click on Upload File to attach a document. Step 9, Submit Report. When finished, click Submit Report. Once you click Submit Report, you will then be prompted by another pop-up confirming you would like to submit the financial report. Click on OK to submit the report to the State Broadband Office. Step 10, Financial Report recorded. The subrecipient will be taken back to the award detail page, where the financial report will now be recorded under the financial activities. Step 11, Financial Report Status. The financial report status will change depending on the approver's actions. There are 4 actions that you will receive as a subrecipient. 1 is rejected. The financial report has been reviewed and is rejected. 2 is pending approval. The financial report is under review and has not been approved. 3, approved and awaiting payment. The financial report has been approved by the State Broadband Office and a payment is being processed. 4, approved and paid. The reimbursement is now complete. Step 12, task completion. If this report fulfills an assigned financial report task in pending task table, click on the actions icon next to the task and click Mark Task Complete. Next, we'll discuss the reimbursement approval process. The reimbursement review process will commence once a subrecipient has submitted the required information in eCivis. The reimbursement verification process. There are 4 steps the ACA will cover to ensure a complete and accurate submission by the subrecipient. Step 1 is cost eligibility check. ACA will determine based on the information provided whether the costs are allowable and unallowable. Step 2 is document verification. ACA will determine whether all documents have been submitted and completed as required in the form and detailed in the payment reimbursement guide. Step 3, disbursement initiation. Once ACA completes its review, ACA will accept the financial request in eCivis and a notification will be provided to the subrecipient. Step 4, completeness check and notification. Once a payment reimbursement request package is approved by ACA during its review, it will be routed for payment. Next, we move into the reimbursement request resubmittal process. If ACA determines that additional information is provided or that costs are not eligible for reimbursement, ACA will return the submitted reimbursement package during the verification process through eCivis. ACA will provide sufficient detail and information to subrecipients within the return package for the subrecipient to address and resubmit. Once ACA returns a package, a notification will be sent to the subrecipient who will be given the opportunity to correct and resubmit the supporting documents. If the subrecipient resubmits documents, ACA will review and verify the documents as well as the claimed amount with respect to reimbursement. If the resubmitted documents are returned by ACA, then those expenses will not be eligible for reimbursement and only expenses approved in the request will be processed for reimbursement. If the entire reimbursement request is rejected, then no reimbursement will be processed and the reimbursement request will end. The State Broadband Office will be available to assist the subrecipient through the resubmittal process. It is important to note that the payment reimbursement to subrecipients is only approved if all requirements are met. Next is the project cost matrix that has been referred to throughout this presentation. Subrecipients should familiarize themselves with the project cost matrix, as well as the Treasury guidance and the grant agreement, to determine whether a cost is eligible or not eligible for reimbursement under the ABDG program. The project cost matrix provided within is not an exhaustive list. It aims to provide an example of allowable project costs for reimbursement within each eCivis cost category. Subrecipients should determine whether a cost is allowable and associated costs should be categorized in the appropriate categories. Failure for a subrecipient to do so may result in a delayed or rejected payment reimbursement request. Lastly, the ABDG program administration support. A variety of resources are available to subrecipients to help guide the payment reimbursement process. Included within this presentation are the eCivis home portal, where subrecipients will log into and submit required information. The eCivis user guide has been included as well, which this provides step-by-step guidance on how to submit a payment reimbursement request in eCivis. Lastly, the State Broadband Office Support Team email has been provided, and we are happy to assist with questions and comments for anything related to the program, and also related to the payment reimbursement process. So if there are any questions on any of the information that has been provided in this presentation, do not hesitate to email the Broadband Grants azcommerce.com email, and we will respond as quickly as possible. Thank you so much.